Well, what's in this one? We've got point failures, we've got a visit to a mainline station with some great signal detail, improvements at the branch line station, and a review on modelling lights. It's all in the autumn update. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie and welcome to my autumn update. So what's all that about then? Well, my seasonal updates tend to focus on subjects that aren't covered in full-blown videos. So rather than do a half-hour video on locomotive improvements, let's say, which is something I'm working on, it's about the smaller segments that don't really fit in anywhere else. So a look at something I've purchased or something I developed or something I've mended and that kind of thing. So if there's anything you would like me to cover, and one of the topics might be figure painting, if you want to, polish your skills or whatever, honing in on, 00 type scale figures, it's something I'm going to have a go at, but is that the sort of thing you'd like me to film so we can develop our skills together? That's the sort of thing I'm looking at it. Right, autumn update, let's go. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I was up at the Great Electric Train Show at Milton Keynes. And there's a company there called Model U, which you may have heard of. And what they do is you can stand in the middle of their sort of booth and they have 360-degree visibility with their special kind of cameras and they capture you, as it were. And then a couple of weeks later, they send you a little GIF. And there I am sitting down as a train driver with the wrong hat on, but hey ho. And you sort of approve the GIF. And then a couple of weeks later, you get the miniature you, or the very miniature me, in the post. Lovely. And when I was up at Getz, I gave my miniature me to a gentleman by the name of Dan Everson, who I'm sure you've heard of, who's an extremely gifted model painter, and he painted me up. And here's the result. Lovely job. Thank you very much, Dan. But when I spoke with Model U, I was actually having a quiet sort of moan, really, because they don't seem to have any 1960s 1970s line side staff, permanent way guys and all these sort of stuff, because in those days they didn't have full high vis on. They had sort of donkey jackets with a half high vis jacket. It was a strange arrangement. Anyway, thankfully they've now put their nose to the grindstone, obviously found some of the jackets and done some scans, and I'll have some on order. But there we go. Thank you very much, Model U. You'll receive my order in a week or two. And perhaps you might be interested, and you can find them on their Model U website. Now, a few weeks ago, while I was sorting out video 235, the branch line design, I noticed that one of the points down here, point number 1, wasn't actually switching the current to the frog as the position of the point was changed. What was happening was, in the closed position, yes, it's powered, but if you throw the point, it's dead. Now, with your fingers crossed, you'd like to think it's just a cable that's fallen off from the point motor. Well, of course, that wasn't the case. Now, on removing the point motor from the layout and taking out the 5 screws and the actuating arm, it then became obvious that one of the 2 contacts, the phosphor bronze contacts, had come away completely from the arm. And sadly, this isn't a terribly rare occurrence. David Townend down at McKinley Railway has come across it quite regularly, and taking advice from him, I've invested in some bolts, and on the back of them there's a set of nuts, and then super glue over the top of the nuts to keep them in place, and this is the replacement assembly to go back into the point motor. It seems rather over-engineered, but well, what else are you supposed to do? The thing is with these, they've got a 9-year warranty, but you never know how long they kind of sit in a box, and this one here is actually no new beast. It's manufactured in 2009, and the 08, I imagine, is August. So there we are. Anyway, as necessary, I will work my way through my Tortoise point motors and carrying out this modification. There's a link to this modification and how McKinley have done it up in the corner. Now, taking this issue with the Tortoise point motors a stage further, again from advice from David Townend down at McKinley, he uses some components made by Signatrack, and that's the DAC20 and the one that's superseded, the DAC22. Now, underneath the riverboard layout, I previously had two Digitrack DS64 units. One of them was subsequently replaced with a 74, and now I've taken them both out and installed a DAC22. But what does that do for me? Well, when I throw the point, then it feeds back into train controller saying that the point is known as off, and when it's closed it feedbacks saying it's on. Train controller, or more importantly LocoNet, sends that signal out to tell all the other components this point is now in a different position. And this is absolutely fundamental to ensure that your signals do reflect the position of your points. Now, when I installed that DAC22 underneath the board, I actually removed all 7 of the point motors and switched the actuating arms for ones that I drilled in and fitted the nuts and bolts, rather than sort of rely on the 2 little molten studs going through those phosphor bronze contacts. So hopefully they're good for another 20 years. They should outlast me. Fingers crossed. Of course, besides the general maintenance of the layout, such as replacing those point motors and changing around electronics bits, I'm also trying to progress part of the build. And as we see here, looking into the end of platform 1 and 2 at the branch line station, I've reinstalled the 3 aspect signals for both those platforms. Because the track moved across, I had to dig it all up and start again. So we've got it in the right place now. We've figured out how it goes, and the signal has been confirmed it still does work perfectly. So now it's a case of just painting and gluing on those pieces of platform surface. Another step nearer completion, hopefully. Now let's change the subject to something that's very dear to my heart, and that is head codes, especially on the sort of 1960s, early 70s locomotives. Of course, head codes are there all the time, they're just no longer displayed. So you may still get a 1A72 running from Bristol Templemeads to London Paddington, or a 1S56 running from Euston up into Scotland, up into Glasgow or wherever. So how do you get your locomotive fleet to have the right head codes? Now, I've been recently given a tip about a website called railgenarchive.co.uk, and we'll go and take a look at it in a few moments on the computer, and you can type in various fields and do various searches. There are thousands of pieces of information in there. Of course, it's nowhere near complete. You can't put every trip that every locomotive has ever run, but there are some wonderful bits of information to be gained from it. Now, if we take a look at my Class 50s, I own 3 of them, all from Hornby, and at one end you can see that there is a 1M12 head code, and on the other there is a 1S57. So what do they mean, and are they any use to me as a West Country modeller? Now, many months ago I had a go at renumbering some of my Class 50s, and it was a bit of a disaster, to be perfectly honest. And if you want to take a look at that video, there should be a link up here. And I didn't do the right research. So here you can see that 3 of them have been renumbered, but they've actually only been renumbered on one side. And I was informed by a very skilled modeller by the name of Laura that I should never have renumbered the Hornby 421 into 400, because 400 didn't actually have the grab handles on the front. So we all make mistakes. But using the Railgen Archive website, I can then see when those locos came down to work from the Euston to Scotland run down into the West Country, mainly being used sort of the Paddington, Bristol, Templemeads kind of routes. And of course, when I renumbered them, I shouldn't have put in the D suffix, because when they came down south, the D was removed at that stage. So it wasn't D401, it was just 401. So how do we go about doing the research to give us the right numbers for our locos in the right regions? Now whilst it's starting it off on RailGen Archive, I just want to show you this is what's happening today. So here we can see that 1A86 is a Plymouth to London Paddington service running through Castle Carey. So you can see that these head code numbers are still in existence. Right, now let's get into the RailGen archive. Now, so we'll do a little search for a locomotive, and let's start with one that I've renumbered, 404. So we go into it, and here we can see that 404 was working in Scotland, but she, in the February 74, she had been post tops numbered as 50004, and she's working in Temple Meads. But the earlier entry between that was actually May 73, so there's a great deal of data missing from 404. So let's just try 418, because these are the ones that I've kind of inadvertently renumbered prior to doing any decent research. And again we can see that this one was in Scotland as 418. In fact, she stayed in Scotland when she was post tops numbered, because she was there in October 73 as 50018 in Glasgow. Shortly afterwards she actually came down Paignton, London, Paddington, pulling a 1A55, so she came down. But what I did find was, here's one 402, which is a little more interesting. And here we can see 402 in Scotland and Manchester, Perth, and then in December 73 she's now pulling a 1A22 service of 1515 out of Temple Meads into Paddington. So she's now in the West Country running a service. All good stuff. Now it's worth noting there is a highlight here for the dates. Now if I were to click on the 31st of December, then up comes the locomotive movements that have been recorded on that date, which is fascinating really, because here we see a load of peak services, class 47 services, and for me in the West Country here are the class 52 Western services. So obviously someone from the West Country has been in here and put in a great deal of information. Lovely, it really is cracking stuff. If I go to the next page, and then we can see, you know, all the stuff that's going on with the Westerns. Someone's done a very good job here of sorting this out. Here's a strange one, because it's a 1E21 Penzance to Leeds, which is an Eastern region service, you know, leaving the West Country for the Eastern region. Lovely. Now back in my opening sequence here, we can see that I have a 1E sequence. Sorry, not 1E15, 1764 wasn't it? The locomotive. 1764, and search for her. And indeed she was running in the Eastern region. Not a lot going on in the West Country, that's for sure, but she was post tops sort of 73, 74 time, but she certainly wasn't running around in the West Country as 1764 wasn't there. She did break the rules in somewhat, because she did come down south on a motor rail service, and she left Newton Abbot on the 3rd of June on a 1S56 running 1840 out of Newton Abbot up to Stirling on what we perceive to be a motor rail service. So hopefully from this you can see the usefulness of this website. Now before we kick off on the next bit, have you subscribed yet? Now come on, play the game. There's the old subscriber button. Hit the button and help the channel to grow. Right, now a few weeks ago I produced a video on the branch line design. Now I was explaining the way that this steam loco is moved along the platform, and obviously the nose of it swings out and strikes the platform. So obviously you need to adjust your platforms accordingly so that doesn't happen. Well, it would appear that in real life it does happen, and here at the West Somerset Railway you can see they've nibbled out part of their platform, and it's a worldwide thing because Good old Christopher 200 has shown us an example from Australia where they've done exactly the same, because the points are in the way, the Loco's nose swings and it strikes the platform. So again, you can nibble it out. So if you've got one, well, why not nibble yours out as well? Because it's prototypical. Woo! I also found on eBay some 3D printed GWR style benches, which I'm well pleased with, and they'll be painted up next week once the paint arrives in the post. Now, back in the summer, Margaret and I went up to Chester, a lovely city, and I'm sure you'd agree if you've been there. And why did we go there? Well, a bit of a long weekend away really, but there is Chester Zoo, which is a fabulous zoo. It really is a pleasure to go there, but also it was making tracks on in the cathedral. So whilst Margaret did a bit of shopping, I popped in there and had a little look at Pete Waterman's layout. But also I went down to Chester railway station, and this is well worth a visit. The architecture is somewhat complex, because I think it's an amalgamation of several companies that were joined up when the Big Four amalgamated. Now, I don't pretend to be any expert on modern image trains, I must confess, but here I am on Chester's platform 2 and 3, and this little 3-car DMU is coming into platform 2. Now, whilst modern trains aren't my sort of area of expertise, let's say, I do like signalling. As this train comes in, if we now look at signal CR84, we'll see it switch to green, but with a couple of yellow flashes, which I thought was rather odd. And then the M illuminates, which is the theatre box main line. And with a toot of his horn and a little wave, off goes our friendly driver. Now, he's taking a British Rail Class 221 Super Voyager, a class of tilting diesel electric multiple unit express train. Quite clearly I'm reading this, down towards London. It's made up of 2 5-car units. Made by Bombardier, I believe, back in 2001 and 2002. Lovely, that's the way to travel. Now, looking back at platform 2, we can see that it still has wooden sleeper track. So if you've still got your code 100 knocking around, and why shouldn't you? And leave it in there. This stuff is going to be around for many, many years to come. Nice to see it still surviving. On the platform, similar to my branch line station, there's a central drain which actually goes underneath the canopies as well. Looking at platform 3, you've got the normal Board of Trade white painted line on the edge, but also the tactile paving that we see everywhere these days. And then out from that is the stand clear yellow line, so that passengers stay safe should there be an incoming express train. Lots of stuff dotted around the station to look at, but one thing you can't see, it's clean. You can't see oodles of rubbish littering around the place. Over at platform 1 there, I noticed on this platform there was no corbelling, so it must be a relatively new construction post the days of steam engines with all its connecting rods and paraphernalia. Over on platform 6 we see a Liverpool Lime Street DMU service departing. And this goes out on the down line, that's in the theatre box. Now, if we take a closer look at the signals, we can see over here that they start at CR64, and then we have CR68, CR72, CR74 and 76, and notice they're all even numbers because they are on the up line, they face London, and clearly if it was the other way they'd be odd numbers. Now, looking back at platform 6, I posted something about this a few weeks ago about the squiggly lines welded to the railhead. Well, apparently It's a sort of stainless steel weld, and it's to help with block detections of trains that are in a rather run-down bay platform, let's say, where the signal of the locomotive's presence isn't well connected. So there we are, it's a continuity job for signalling. Now, above these two girls walking down platform 7A is a banner repeater signal, CR R93, R standing for repeater. Now, what's all that about? Well, at the end of that platform is CR93, its sort of main signal. So why do you need a banner repeater? Well, I'm sure most of you will know it's because of the curvature of this platform. So if there was a train parked in platform 7A, it wouldn't be able to see the signal. So therefore, the banner repeater repeats what its main signal says. Now, looking around the station, I remarked about its cleanliness compared to Norwich Station, where I went earlier in the year. But there are lots of other little intricate markings around here to be sort of noted. You know, drain covers, bits of detritus lying around, all sorts of stuff. Just general items that add to the atmosphere of a station. Now, in the centre now, you can see the back of a 30-mile-an-hour speed sign. So, you know, it's not only the speed limits leaving the station, but also coming into the station that are kind of noteworthy. There's no great overgrown sort of massive weeds here. It's just a few sort of burnt out weeds. It's nothing too serious. It's just a well kept, looked after station, and I think the crew at Chester should be well pleased with themselves. They have a remarkably clean and efficient station from what I can see. But what is worthy of note is obviously we've got all these signals with their theatre boxes and their position lights, but also there's the barrow walkway up between the platforms. There's the detritus, there's the rails, there's the cable troughing, and all the other sort of stuff that's scattered around to make our railways sort of more, our model railways, more believable. Chester, a place that really is well worth a visit. Okay, moving on. Now, it'd be wrong if I didn't talk about the purchases that I made since my summer update. Well, there's only been 2 major purchases, and I'm somewhat pleased to say that none of them are rolling stock. I haven't been to shows and thought, oh, shiny thing, I must buy it. But what I have bought is a replacement for this beast. This is a gimbal mount for using a camera. As you can see, it has a 3-axis gimbal, and the thing is about it, it is absolutely heavy, and you kind of hold it out here or on a tripod, and as you can imagine, you run up and down your railway with it. It's a beast, and I wouldn't recommend this to anybody to buy. I bought the wrong one. I should have bought the DGI version. Anyway, so what I have bought instead, and I am not recommending this in the slightest, is something from DGI. This is a DGI Osmo 6, and I will do a review on it once I've thoroughly tested it, and I'm not suggesting you buy one of these by any stretch of the imagination, but this also is a 3-axis gimbal, and it can lock on and do focus tracking and all this kind of blah, but this is something I'll make a separate video on in the future, and do some running sequence shots of trains zipping around, and I'll shoot some sequences with the old Zion and some with the DGI, and so we can get a comparison, and if it's any good, then you know, I'll make you make your own decision. But this is far easier, isn't it? And of course you don't need a separate camera. I've got an old iPhone here and it seems to work reasonably well. So, but only, again, the proof is in the pudding. Please give me time to test this out and I'll let you know in the future. Right, put this down a sec. Now, as you may know, I am a stunning 66 years old, and I've been to Boots recently and bought a few pairs of glasses actually. There's this pair of varifocals, the same pair with a sort of a tint on sunglasses things, and some decent reading glasses. It's because my eyes are on the kind of the downward slope of old age, I suppose. But when I've noticed it in my modelling is when I'm doing my painting and intricate work, or whether it's intricate soldering, super gluing, all this sort of stuff. So here's a purchase that I have made recently, which I can recommend. Now, I can't deny that in the past I have found things like painting figures somewhat challenging. Just trying to get the detail in there, and as time goes on, your hands shake and everything else, and your eyes are sort of failing. So from there on, obviously I use reading glasses. I then matured to the Optivisor. Nice bit of kit this, and you can get interchangeable lenses. However, what people don't seem to realise is you don't necessarily need the interchangeable lenses, because with your reading glasses, he said, switching to his reading glasses, you can then pop the Optivisor on, looking rather a bit strange, and it changes your focusing distance, but you can see perfectly well. And you can try them with or without your readers. Yes, beautiful. I like the Optivisor. I know you can get a sort of ones, and that market one that has little LEDs on it, which kind of help, I imagine, but there we go. I don't think they're gimmicky. I think they're probably quite useful. Now, depending on how much detail you need to sort of do, I mean, I put these tiny resistors onto my wheels for block detection, so that the trains will know, when the wagon has passed through completely, and also figure painting. And whilst I'm on it, if you'd like to see some figure painting, and we'll have a half an hour of figure painting together, then do leave a comment in the show more tab, because it's something I'm trying to get involved in, and I'm trying to, my craft is coming on a little better. It's just a case of, giving yourself adequate amount of time, because it's not an expensive old game. Right, anyway, back to eyesight. So that really didn't do it completely, because there was a lack of light. So I invested in one of these things, and I'm sure many of you guys watching would have already owned one. So what you've got there really is a magnifying glass and magnifying glass and an LED ring. Now I have to switch to my readers now, because I can't see anything with those. And there we are. And it's quite good, because you're into the subject. You can see exactly what you're doing, and it's pretty nifty. But if you put anything else, I was always fumbling around outside and getting in closer. And in the end, I did away with it. Of course, you don't have to use the light. You can just use it, standard. But it was kind of taking up bench space, and I really wasn't using it. But you do need some form of light. Now, I went to the Great Electric Train Show a couple of weeks ago, as I mentioned earlier, and I found these. This is an LED panel. It's pretty nifty, because obviously the higher you have it, the more the spread, but it's pretty nifty because of the spread of light. So if you're there with your Optivisor on now, you can see right across. Or if you're painting, you can get your paints. You're not governed by the small pool of light from this thing. Anyway, so you get it out and have a look. So what's it all about? Well, there are 4 different brightness settings. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and there's obviously the off, and it says what it does on the tin. Really, you can see what it's like. You can move it in all sorts of mobile ways, to suit your task. But I kind of like it. It's quite nifty, really. Yeah, pretty good. And when you turn it down, if you were to turn it off at the mains, it remembers the setting that you were on. If that makes sense. Yes, there we go. 6500 Kelvin, that was the word I was searching for. Yeah, but it lights up quite well. Now, if I bring something else in here so we can see it on the other camera, hopefully you can see the detail that shows up from this light, and you can bring it in closer or whatever. Now, if I turn off as part of the studio lights here, you can see exactly how much light this kicks out. So you can still see from the other camera this sort of amount of light we've got. Yeah, it's lovely. I like this. Now, I spoke with a company. Let me turn it off. Spoke with a company. Oh, by the way, you can just sort of poke it out of the way then, can't you? It's easy. spoke to the company, and the chap Richard said, yeah, it's interesting, that's quite nice. He says, I'll tell you what, he says, I'll do you a link for your followers, and will be a link there's a link down in the Show More tab to this light, and it's Chadwick 10, and if you click it, you'll get 10% off the light, or if you go roaming around the website, 10% off anything you like. But it's a good little bit of kit. I like it. I'm not suggesting you ought to buy one, but if you've got the sort of space and the failing eyesight as I have, I think it's a shrewd investment, and with 10% off, well, there we go. Not a bad idea, really, is it? I like it and I recommend it. And it's the only thing that I've bought this year today that I can recommend, really. Still, nothing wrong with being a bit frugal, is there? Well, I hope you enjoyed the autumn update, and please remember that it's a community thing. It's not about me, it's you, it's us. So if there's something you'd like me to look into, then please leave it down in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. Anyway, there's the old subscriber button, and there's the old patrons button. The patrons get it a day before everyone else and without the adverts. If you'd like to become a patron, don't forget to hit that. And subscribing is obviously free. And there's a video here and here, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.